Watch to the end of this video to learn more. Hello fellow CNC nuts and welcome. In this episode I had planned to be continuing on with part 2 of machining a model of New Zealand in 3D as my piece of wall art. Only problem is I ordered some tapered bullnose cutters from China, and it was meant to be 2mm, and I ended up with this here, a 4mm bullnose cutter. It appears that one of us doesn't speak English, and it also appears that it's me. I ordered a 2mm radius bullnose cutter, so of course it's 4mm at the tip. You live and learn. I've now ordered some 1mm radius cutters, which will give me the 2mm that I want, and while I'm waiting I've come up with another project. I was looking through the Masso forum and I came across a gentleman by the name of Ross who had done a plasma cut of a miner using a sluice box. You can sort of see it on the screen up there behind me. He sent me the image, and from that I've created some files and I'm going to have a go at cutting it. He said to send him a picture when it's finished, so let's get it cut, painted, and see what we end up with. Don't know whether this is going to work or not, but I think it will. So if you're anything like me, you'll be thinking, what the hell was that? That wasn't exactly what I had expected to happen, although I should have known better. You'll notice partway through the cut I got rid of the dust shoe because it was pulling out these pieces here, and then they were getting caught in the shoe, twisted around and broken off. And some of these very fine pieces here I don't think should be coming off. So by removing the dust shoe, hopefully I've got rid of that as best I can. But there's a lot of fine pieces here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through with my vacuum cleaner now, clean up as much of this dust as possible and pick up any of these little pieces like this that shouldn't be there, and maybe pull out any pieces that are not attached. I just have to be very careful about what I remove. So bits like this here, even though there's bits in the center of it that have been removed, bits like this shouldn't be there as well. We'll see what we got when I've done that. And there it is, the miner with sluice box. It's certainly the effect I was looking for, but it's not quite as good as I hoped it would be. Now part of the issue is the MDF I used. This is just an old piece of MDF that's been sitting out in this workshop for quite a few years now, and I used this for the project. Problem is, when I used the down cutting spiral bit to cut this out, it pushed all the back of the MDF out and it's gone fluffy like this here. It made it very hard to try and sand to get rid of it, especially on these thin bits here, and I've still got a bit of fluffiness showing there. I think if I was to do it again, and I probably will, instead of using the down cutting bit, I'd use an up cutting bit, which would pull the fluff to the surface here, and I would make my first cut half the depth of the MDF I would then sand it flat, because at that stage there are no thin bits that are unsupported. That would clean them all up, and then I'd let it cut all the way through, and that should pull all these fluffy bits towards the front and basically get rid of them. That's my theory anyway. So I think a different cutting strategy is needed. Now the other thing is, of course, I cheated when I made this here. I just simply took the original image, converted it to a vector, and just said, well, whatever ends up falling out is fine by me, and I'll just keep what remains. Because it was actually quite complex to go through and try and figure out what was going to be taken away and what was going to be left. But the problem there is, when it came to small pieces like this here, it would put stress on them, and I think a few of them broke off in the cutting process because it moved, it wasn't supported anymore. Whereas if I'd gone through, spent a bit more time going through the image, working it all out so that the breakaway bits were a bit more supported as they were cut, I think I would have ended up with a better product. Lastly, in here, I know that looking at Ross's one, his one looks a lot better. He's got a much better definition in the water coming from the sluice box, and that's all to do with the fact that he actually spent a lot of time going through this. I think he said it took 2 days to get through and do this image, whereas I spent about half an hour to an hour on it. I wasn't too worried. I just wanted to see what it would come out like and what the potential problems were. But all in all, it's come up pretty good. Once it was cut and sanded, then I just simply got out a can of spray paint, sprayed it, and hung it on the wall. So I think I'm going to give this another go and see if I can make some improvements on it. So a week has now passed since my first attempt at machining the Miner, and I'm going to take my own advice and have a second attempt. I've using thicker MDF, not because 3mm is no good, but because I've run out of it. I've got some 4.75, so I'm going to use that this time. I honestly don't think that will make much of a difference, but I am going to use a down cutting spiral bit for the first pass, which should give me a nice clean surface. But I'm going to stop after the first pass and just give that a light sanding. That should make it much easier to clean up when I'm finished. I'm then going to change the cutter and to an up cutting bit, and that I'll use for the second pass, and that should give me a clean bottom of my cut. Hopefully it'll minimize the amount of sanding I need to do at the end. I've also been through and cleaned up the drawing, so there should be a lot less cutting required. And with that, we're going to give this a try. But before that, I'd like to thank my sponsor, Masso CNC Controllers. This video is sponsored by Masso CNC Controller. Masso can run mills, lathes, routers, plasma machines, and more. Simply connect your stepper or servo motor drives, a monitor, keyboard, mouse, and pen drive with your G-code. No PC required, giving outstanding reliability while eliminating driver and motion card compatibility issues. Masso, the PC-less controller. Powerful, stable, guaranteed. Okay, well, without further ado, let's get on with the cutting. Oh, by the way, if you want to see what a real plasma machine does with this here, I'll put a link in the description box below to where you can go and watch Ross cutting out the Miner with sluice box. And here it is, the completed Miner with sluice box. And again, unfortunately, it's another failure. When it was doing the first cut and it had finished that, I noticed that some of the pieces had actually delaminated under the sideways pressure of the cutter. Unfortunately, I'd made them just that little bit too thin. Things went from bad to worse on the second cut when I changed to the upcutting spiral bit, it pulled the MDF up off the table and started cutting it through. That caused a lot of vibration, and I tried to use a screwdriver tip to keep the material in place. But when you've got thin pieces like this here and they start moving on you, you're not going to get good cuts. So the secret here is to not make really thin bits, and you select a project that's suitable for the material you're using, or at least select material that's suitable for the project you're making. In this case, thin MDF just isn't right for the job. What is ideal, of course, is something like steel, and you use a plasma cutter to cut it. If you're interested, go and check out Ross's video of him cutting out this miner with sluice box, and I'll put a link in the video description below. But I am determined to have a win in this episode. Well, I may have been beaten by a piece of MDF, but maybe we can do something. A YouTuber by the name of Mr. Beast is trying to raise $20 million to plant 20 million trees before the end of this year. That's only 2 months away, and that's $1 a tree. Chip and I are going to donate 50 trees to the cause, and if you're interested, you can visit the website teamtrees.org and make a donation. Remember, every tree counts. And that's where I'm going to leave this episode. All that remains me to do is to thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, it's good to have wood. Now, if I catch you eating one of those trees, there's going to be trouble.
But I won't eat your ones.
No!
Well, what about if I just suck on a leaf?
You know what you're like. You've got absolutely no self-control. Can't leave you alone for a minute.